Welcome back to Arena. Arena is a place for questions, for big questions. And this time round, we've been looking at big questions of sex, death, and the meaning of life, and thinking about how Jesus helps us to make sense of all of those. Let's start this time with a thought experiment. What would happen if God visited the earth? Perhaps you've thought in the past before, well, if I saw God, if he appeared right in front of me, well, then I might believe in him. Or perhaps you've just thought about what would happen. What would he do? What would you say to him? What would you ask? What would you expect him to do? The claim that this book makes is that 2,000 years ago, in Roman-occupied Palestine, that thought experiment got played out. So what happened when God visited the earth? Well, if you know anything about the life of Jesus, you probably know the most famous bits are at the end of it, that he was crucified, he was killed on a cross. So, what happened when God visited the earth? It turned out that everyone got together and tried to kill him. How did it get to this? I thought Jesus was the good guy in the book. I thought he was supposed to be nice. Why did people want to kill him? When we look through the whole story of Jesus' life as John tells it to us, we see that this trouble had been brewing for a while. Back in chapter 5, Jesus healed a man on the Sabbath, the Jewish religious holy day. And it says after that for this reason they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So the reason they wanted to kill him was partly religious. He was making himself equal with God. In chapter 11, we see that the religious leaders are worried that the attention Jesus is getting might provoke some sort of response from the Romans. They call a meeting together and say, here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. So it was partly political as well. Jesus had come announcing that the kingdom of God had come. And some people, understandably though wrongly, thought that that meant that Jesus would get a band of people together and have some sort of armed resistance against the Romans. The religious leaders, who were quite enjoying their status in the status quo, were worried about that, thinking that that might provoke some heavy-handed Roman response. So they get together to kill Jesus. Eventually, it all came to a head. The religious leaders bribed one of Jesus' own followers, Judas Iscariot, to betray Jesus over to them. In chapters 18 and 19 of John, we see the aftermath. Jesus is brought before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, and stands trial. Pilate is pretty cynical about the religious leaders' motivations. In chapter 18, verse 29, he asks them, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. Pilate asks them what Jesus could possibly have done, but all they can say is, "Trust us, he's definitely the guilty type." Pilate, a Roman governor, has no interest in their bizarre little religious squabbles. He tries to send them away, but they've already decided the sentence before the trial. They want him executed. So Jesus stands trial before Pilate, and at points, it's hard to work out who's really on trial. Jesus seems to get right under Pilate's skin. Eventually, Pilate decides there's no basis for a charge. In chapter 19, Pilate brings Jesus out in front of the crowd and says, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." Now Pilate is confused. These people that he's been sent by head office in Rome to rule are Jewish, and this man is supposed to be the King of the Jews. Why don't they support him? Aren't they supposed to be on his side? It goes on, "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate said. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. So, what would happen if God visited the earth? Well, it turns out this is what happened when God did visit the earth. But is it a surprise? It's not really a surprise at all. In the past 2 sessions, we've seen that our natural human tendency is to reject God and to substitute him with anything we can get our hands on. Here, we see that tendency within us just carried to its logical conclusion. Faced with God in the flesh, right in front of them, his own countrymen decide that they would rather kill him and remain subject of a foreign empire. And we would do the same. If God in the flesh was in front of us, we would rather have him gone as well. But there are still a few puzzling, unanswered questions. For example, in the last session, it seemed that if you stayed with Jesus, you got life. That's what he said. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. That certainly was true for his friend Lazarus, who died, but then because Jesus showed up, came back to life again. So why is it that Jesus, who seems to give life, can end up dead? The other puzzle, and perhaps the bigger puzzle, is this: that the whole time it seems like Jesus could have got out of it. In all the events leading up to his death, it seemed like he had opportunities to escape. So why didn't he? It seems almost like Jesus was choosing to die. But why? Well, Jesus himself gives us the answer. The night before he died, he was having dinner with his friends, and he said to them, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." Why did Jesus die? Well, out of the deepest love imaginable, he chose to lay down his life for his friends. He chose to exchange his life for the life of others. John throws in another clue about this exchange in chapter 11. I read a bit of it earlier, but I'll read some more of it now. The chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting. "If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man should die for the people than that the whole nation should perish." We're left with big questions to investigate now. What does Jesus' death mean? How could his death give meaning to our lives? And how could his death be not just for his friends, not just for his nation, but even for the whole world?